Good evening, everyone. Tonight's video is going to cover the A part. So, for those of you who do not know what an A part is, after you complete flight school, you're going to go to your aviation unit and you're going to be progressed. At the end of progression, you're going to be designated RL1 or Readiness Level 1. What Readiness Level 1 means is you have been evaluated and trained and you are endorsed that you can perform everything that is expected of a pilot in the Army. So you can fly with any pilot in command at this point. No longer do you have to be with an IP anymore. You can fly with any PC at your unit. Every single year, you are expected to take what is called an A part. This is basically a proficiency exam to show, or where you have to demonstrate to an instructor pilot that you can still perform all of the tasks you are expected to be able to perform to the standards outlined in the ATM. So the way this happens is it's based on your birth month. So you have what's called the birth month window. I'm a September baby. I was born in September, so my birth window or my A part window opens in July. That means from July to September, I am eligible to be tested on my A part, and I have to be completed with my A part by the end of September. There are exceptions and extensions. However, you don't want that to happen. What you want is to complete your A part in the given time frame. So, like I said, this A part will happen every 12 months in your birth month window, and there's several phases of the A part. So, what's at stake in the A part? Obviously, the goal is to demonstrate to an instructor pilot in your unit that, hey, I have what it takes to be a pilot. I have what it takes to be an RL1 pilot, and if anything, you want to exceed the standard to demonstrate that you are a good candidate for pilot in command. I think the A part is a good time to demonstrate that and evaluate that in a PC candidate. So obviously that is the ideal thing you want to do. So what happens if you fail your A part? Well, you can be downgraded from RL Level 1 to RL2 or RL3, depending on how bad you did in your A part. Fortunately, I've never seen this happen to anybody. I have heard of it happening to people in other units, but typically you have a year to prepare for your A part, so you should be more than ready. You have an entire year to fly and prepare for it and study for it. So by the time your A part rolls around, you have what it takes to maintain that RL Level 1 and hopefully make a good impression on your IP. Now, there are several parts to the A part. So you have your academic portion. So like I mentioned earlier, when your A part window opens 2 months prior to your birth month, there's a series of classes that you're going to be expected to take. So you have your air mission survivability classes. Those are secret classes that you will be progressed on once you get to your unit, and then when you're, like I said, when your A part window opens, you will retake the academics for that. And you also have to do aircrew training. It's basically a 1 hour class where you sit down with a stands person and they go over aircrew coordination principles and basically go over a bunch of vignettes of accidents that have happened due to poor aircrew coordination, and you discuss them. And then that's pretty much it as far as the classes go. There's a written exam in your A part. This is a general knowledge exam. It's typically 60 questions, and it basically asks you anything and everything you've pretty much been asked throughout flight school and your time getting trained on your aircraft. it's a take-home test. It's open book. You typically have like 24 hours to complete it and turn it in. And then since it is take-home and open book, you're expected to pass it with a 90 at least. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy since it's open book. So then you have your oral evaluation and you have your flying evaluation. So the oral evaluation and your flying evaluation typically happen on the same day. The oral evaluation will be a sit down with your instructor pilot that's doing your A part, and it will typically last an hour to 2 hours, and they can ask you pretty much anything that is outlined in the academic catalog in your ATM. Now, these questions range from airspace to pubs and regs to aircraft systems. Typically, they want you to explain in detail at least one of the aircraft systems. And that's not really your choosing. Typically, the day of, they will ask you. For example, on my A part, the IP that was doing mine asked me about the hydraulics. And I had to explain everything about the hydraulics pretty much. And it's typically done in a scenario like, hey, what happens if you get a Reslo 2? Tell me exactly what happens to the system. And then you walk them through that part, and then they'll be like, okay, well, what if you have a Reslo 1? And you walk it through that part. It's kind of situational typically. Obviously, IPs vary on how they're going to ask questions. So definitely expect to explain in detail one aircraft system, potentially two, who knows, depends on the IP. And then some aerodynamic questions, definitely 5s and 9s. They are definitely going to ask you limits, they are definitely going to ask you EPs, and even on your flight you are going to have to respond to EPs. And then night vision topics is another one, and then your air mission survivability, also known as AMS, they'll definitely be thrown in there. You'll be expected to explain all of the maneuvers and all of the systems associated with the aircraft for AMS. And then any mission-specific questions or subjects that go along with your unit. For example, I'm medevac, so all of those subjects and topics that I'm going to be asked about will revolve around medevac. Hoist is definitely going to be asked on an A part in a medevac unit. The mission flow process, crew rest, all of those things will definitely be asked on a medevac A part in a medevac unit. Now, air assault, they'll obviously ask you different stuff. And if you're attack, if you're an Apache guy, they're going to ask you attack and Apache stuff. So that's the oral evaluation. Like I said, typically 1 to 2 hour sit down, going over all of the topics pretty much that I just mentioned. And then if you're in flight school right now and you're familiar with the UH-60 ATM or the 64, the 47 ATM, you can actually go in the very front of this ATM and it outlines the topics that you can be asked about in an A part. Now, the flying portion. So after you get, after you've been sitting there doing a 1 to 2 hour oral evaluation with the IP, he will then be like, okay, let's get a crew brief and let's go out and fly. So the flying portion is split into several different portions of the flight. You definitely have to do base task or your 1000 series task, and think of that as like contact phase in Black Hawk. So VMC approaches, VMC takeoffs, your traffic patterns, your roll-on landings, boost off, respond to an emergency procedures, auto rotation, slope landings. All of those things will be evaluated in your base task portion of your flight. Typically it'll be done At an airfield, sometimes, at least at my unit, the IP, if the traffic pattern is too full, they will go out to a much smaller airport and we can do it there. After your base task portion, oh, I forgot to mention too, this is typically done at night, at least for the base task portion, because it's the most demanding mode of flight. So if they can evaluate that and you can do them to standard there, it's obviously you can do it in the daytime. You have your AMS portion, your air mission survivability portion. You'll learn about this in progression, and obviously when you do the academic training in the beginning of your A part, you'll learn all about these. You'll get a refresher on all these maneuvers, and then you go out, you'll get like a radar threat or something, and you have to do the secret maneuver to defeat that threat. Obviously, I am not going to get into that on here because it is secret. So after that, for me, you do a hoist, your hoist evaluation. For me, it's just a 25-foot drop. It could be dummy or live. Just depends on what the IP wants to do for them to evaluate your hoist. And then if you're in an air assault unit, like I said, it's going to be mission dependent. That'll probably be a sling load portion, I'm assuming. I don't know. I'm not air assault. But instead of hoist, you do whatever pertains to your unit. And then the same with attack. And then you have your instrument evaluation, also known as an IFE. So on your instrument evaluation, this is typically done with the company or battalion SP, because typically company or battalion SPs are designated as IEs or instrument evaluators. And this is a whole separate flight and a whole separate oral evaluation. So on the day of your IFE, you will come in with a thoroughly planned out instrument cross country. It has to be a non-precision approach and a precision approach, and you have to conduct holding at one of the locations. My recommendation is to execute the missed approach and do the holding for the missed approach because it typically flows a lot better. But that's just my thought. I do know that they have to evaluate holding, so make sure that's definitely something to think about. And then, like I said, typically your instrument evaluator wants you to thoroughly be able to explain your plan. They'll pull out the approach plates and ask you all kind of things about your approach plates, and obviously you have to answer them. So, story time. Just like I always do with my videos, I typically tell a story relating to the topic covered. So, I've only had one A part. As you guys know, those of you who watch my channel a lot and have viewed all my videos, I'm relatively new. I just had my first A part. I've been at my unit for about a year. So, I just completed my A part about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and it went pretty well. The day of my A part was several flights. So the day of my A part, went in, did my oral evaluation with one of the IPs at my company. The oral evaluation went really well, and obviously that was pretty much what I was most nervous about, just because like there is such a range of topics you can be asked about in aviation. You know, like I was covering the topics you can be asked about, like pubs and regs. Pubs and regs is a volume encyclopedia series of documents that you can be asked from. It's such a wide range of information. So it is kind of nerve-wracking studying all of the things you're expected to be able to answer. So that's why I typically get most nervous about the oral evaluation. So like pubs and regs, systems. There's so many systems you can ask about on the Black Hawk, and it's damn near impossible to be an expert at every single system on the aircraft. It's complex aircraft, complex systems. It's very well built, and very well engineered. So there's a lot to understand there, and there's a lot that can be asked about all of those systems. Aerodynamics, a lot of aerodynamics. So I mean, when you start studying all of this stuff, and you get into the material and you study a lot, I've always been told since I've entered aviation, your brain is like an iceberg, and there's so many penguins that you can fit onto that iceberg, and as soon as you start filling it up, some penguins are going to get knocked off and fall off the iceberg. So just constantly refreshing your mind with all of that information that you're constantly taking in and could be asked about anytime. So, story time. Sorry about going down that rabbit hole. The oral evaluation actually went really good. And like I was saying, it's the most nervous part. Did about an hour oral evaluation, and it went pretty solid. My IP even said, like, hey man, your oral knowledge is there, definitely. Went out for the flight. My first flight actually, for my A part, actually ended up getting canceled because the backseater had a broken NVG mount. So we were going to go out for night to do base task, and we tried all 4 of our NVGs that we had in the aircraft, and it wouldn't work. So for this night, we only had 1 backseater, so we made the call to cancel the flight. And I took my A part with another IP on another day. I had already completed my oral evaluation and my hoist evaluation on day 1 of my A part, so whenever I picked it up with the other IP, I only had to do base task and AMS. And that went really good. It was kind of cool because the IP that did my A part on my second, the second portion of my A part for the base task, he actually progressed me whenever I first got to my unit in progression. And it was really good to hear him say, like, man, you have come such a long way. Not saying that you were bad in progression, but it's just crazy to see like where you've come from in progression to where you're at now. And I totally agree. Like, I remember being in progression when I first arrived at my unit and feeling so overwhelmed. Like, man, like it's so hard to fly the aircraft and know the systems and get into the FMS and do all the things that the FMS can do and remember, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 5, like all of these things that you're expected to remember. Like, you feel so overwhelmed, and then as you go through progression and you get out of progression and you start participating in the unit, like the field exercises and stuff, and your bandwidth goes from being very overwhelmed to just expanding so much more, because you're starting to become proficient. Like these things in the aircraft, like the pre-flight, the startup, doing basic VMC flight, like it becomes so routine and so locked into your muscle memory, you're able to have extra bandwidth to focus on other tasks in the aircraft. So it feels really good. So if you're going through progression right now and you feel overwhelmed and you feel like, man, I suck, don't worry, you are going to get better. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but you definitely are going to get better. I felt that way. So my IFE obviously was with my company SP, and honestly, I really enjoy flying with my company SP. He's also my platoon IP, and the company is borrowing him. So he's been made the SP, and he's currently an IE as well, since he is the company SP. And it was pretty uneventful, which is a good thing. So everything went the way that it was supposed to. Obviously on an IFE, do extremely thorough planning. They are going to dig into those approach plates and ask you everything about them, and even your route getting to the approach structure, setting up for your approach. So just be able to answer all of those questions. That's pretty much it. Story was not really that exciting, but that's a good thing for an A part. Obviously, you don't want anything crazy to happen on your A part. I have more content coming to you guys. I apologize for such a long delay on some of my content. We have been super busy, as I have mentioned in previous videos. My unit is getting ready to deploy, so I have been super busy. I've also been getting my private pilot license, so I've been super busy. So apologies on that, and I'm going to keep the content coming. Thank you for supporting my channel.